Looking at pictures of horse riding on the beach, or if you have the privilege of experiencing it yourself, it all seems so idyllic, like everything is as it should be and that nothing in the world could shatter that beautiful moment. And when this is a trail that you ride almost every day, that feeling must be even more ingrained into you. Our story today is a tale of how things can go wrong suddenly, but it's also a breathtaking story of selfless love and not giving up on those that you care about. Nicole Graham had built her life around the care of horses. At this stage, she had owned 10 horses of her own, and she knew each one of them well and loved them all. But if she had to pick a favorite, she would probably go with her horse, Astro. They had a special bond, and one that would later turn out to be unbreakable. Nicole not only had a deep love for these animals in her personal life, but her entire business was centered around their care too. She's the owner of an equine dentistry business and cares for horses every day of her life. It would be unthinkable for her to walk away from any horse in need, and if it was one of the ones she adored personally, it would be completely out of question. Nicole also has a young daughter, and she has taught her daughter, Paris, to love and respect animals just as much as she does. Not only would they care for the animals they owned, but they made sure to give them plenty of exercise. Nicole would ride every day, and most of the time Paris would take out one of the smaller horses and go along with her mother. Living near the coast of Geelong, Australia, one of the biggest perks is that the mother-daughter duo had the freedom to ride along the beach most days. It was a path that Nicole had been using for 20 years, and in all that time she had never had any issues or drama with horses getting injured or running into unexpected hazards. But that was all about to change. Nicole was riding Astro, an 18-year-old horse that weighed half a ton, which is about 1,100 pounds or 500 kilograms. That's one large animal. Paris was slightly behind her mother and riding a horse that was much smaller. Most riders will always be on the lookout for any hazards coming their way. Any branches that might have fallen into a familiar path, holes that animals dug up, or anything that could injure themselves or their animals. But the problem was, there was no warning of any problems to come. The sand looked as it had always looked. It seemed like they were on firm ground and everything in front of them was smooth for miles. There was nothing that they seemed to need to worry about. And that made it even more of a shock when they were just riding along the beach and suddenly Nicole and Astro went down into what could only be called a mud pit. Almost instantly, they were both covered in mud and Astro was down to his neck in mud. Nicole didn't even have time to warn Paris when she and her horse landed in the same thick, muddy mess too. With great effort and probably a lot of maternal strength, Nicole managed to climb out of the mud. Every time she moved, it felt like the mud was pulling her back inside, but she knew she had to get to her little girl and get her to safety. After some struggle, Nicole crawled to Paris and managed to pull out the young girl. Then, together, they freed Paris's horse, which was much smaller than Astro. Checking the horse out, it was clear that he wasn't hurt, and Paris could still ride him. Now the little girl had a big task. She needed to ride back to their car and call for help. Luckily, it was a familiar area, and Nicole knew that she would be safe and find her way. But there was no way that Nicole could leave Astro on his own. If he had become too tired and put down his head, the mud would pull him under and he would surely drown. Paris also needed to hurry. They were up against a ticking clock. They were on the shoreline, but right then it was low tide. The tide was going to turn soon and come in. Where Astro was on the beach, the tide would completely cover him and he would surely drown. This also put Nicole in grave danger. She was not leaving her horse. First, she tried to get him out and pull him to safety, but this is a massive animal and there was no way that she could do it. Each time he moved even a little, he was sucked down deeper in the mud and buried even more. For many of us, shows and movies of our childhood made out quicksand to be a way bigger problem than it would ever be for us. Yes, it is real, but most won't encounter it in their lifetime. What we forget, however, is that normal mud can act in the same way in certain conditions, and this was what Nicole and Astro were facing. She realized that there was just nothing that she was going to be able to do on her own. She needed to calm him and make sure that he would be still and not struggle to make the problem worse, and she needed to help him keep his head up until help came. She made the decision and got back into the mud next to him. This was so dangerous as he could pull both of them down if he suddenly panicked and moved toward her side, but it was a risk that she had to take. Holding his head up and speaking to him softly, she managed to calm him down a little. She must have felt a deep despair at not being able to do more and feeling powerless. She could only hope that her daughter had made it back and called for help. Soon, she got her answer. A vet team and first responders showed up as if coming from nowhere. The firefighters were ready to help and try their best to free the massive horse. But this was not really a situation that they had ever encountered. Each time they tried to get close to Nicole and Astro, they too got sucked into the mud. So started a 3-hour ordeal that would feel much longer for everyone involved. The firefighters threw their fire hose to Nicole and she securely tied it around Astro's body. Then they all tried to pull the horse free. This didn't work. He was too heavy, even for a group of men with a fire truck pulley system, and it was just scaring him more. His breathing had become labored and his eyes were showing more white. The vet crew and Nicole knew that Astro was becoming distressed. They made the decision to sedate the horse before they tried to free him again. This would make Nicole's job even harder since she would need to make sure that in his sedated state he didn't slip under the mud. But she was up for the challenge. Climbing into the mud with them, Vet Stacy Sullivan got close enough to give Astro the medicine that would hopefully keep him calm until they could make a plan to get him to safety. This helped him relax, but he would be of no help when it came time to get him out. He wouldn't know when to try and move forward. On the other hand, he wouldn't struggle and fall in deeper either. They had tried everything. There was even a helicopter standing by to assist in any way that they could. But people were losing hope. The tide was coming closer. They only had minutes to spare before Nicole and Astro would start to be covered in water. She could already feel the spray as the water was getting close. But still, if she left, the sedated Astro would slip under in no time, and she was not going to let that happen. It felt hopeless, and then something incredible happened. A farmer had been watching the drama play out, and now he came closer. He had an idea. They could use his tractor, and since it was made to work in muddy conditions, it should be strong enough to get a good grip and pull Astro to freedom. They had nothing to lose and no more time left. Working quickly, they secured Astro to the tractor and started to pull. Inch by inch, the exhausted horse started to come loose from the mud. It was working. Cheers erupted as he was finally freed. Exhausted and still feeling the sedation, Astro collapsed onto solid ground. Nicole, just as tired, was right next to him. The vet team checked him out and he was not injured. It seemed like a miracle. The horse was safe, thanks to the devotion and love of his owner. Thank you for joining us today, and join us again for even more inspirational stories.